My all-time favorite stand-up comic is Emo Philips. And I adore Emo Philips because he captures the essence of absurdism better than any other comedian. He'll tell a story that'll start off completely innocent. And as you get wrapped up in his little tale and you start getting engrossed in it, you start to realize this is getting kind of twisted. This is not an innocent story. His childhood experience is anything but wholesome. And by the time he gets to the punchline of the story, you've witnessed something so grotesque, so offensive, so unbelievably irrational that you can do nothing but laugh. But unfortunately, Emo has never written a book. I wish he would, but he hasn't. So instead of Emo today, we are going to be discussing Steve Martin and his 1977 book of absolutely absurd poetry and short fiction called Cruel Shoes. Before we dive into Steve, it makes me wonder, why hasn't Emo done a book? I don't understand. He's written some scripts and stuff like that, and his jokes are all very much story type of jokes. I don't get it. He's got so much material. I saw him a lot, especially when I lived in California. I saw him a lot. I used to go to the Center for Inquiry. It's like a science facility where they would like try to discover evidence of psychic phenomena and the supernatural, kind of like Amazing Randy sort of stuff. And he would perform there. Like they would have a weekly Emo Philips night. And there was one particular night that he performed called the Shredder. And he literally had like an electric shredder on the stage. And he would go through all these note cards of jokes he had, like hundreds of jokes that he had written over the years, and put them in the shredder and never perform them again. So there was like a book's worth of material that was literally shredded on stage when he did that performance. I love Emo so much, but he really should write a book, because this dude here, Chris Elliott, I love Chris Elliott too. Get a Life is one of the greatest all-time television shows. And Chris Elliott's written a couple books. He has another one. This is Daddy's Boy that he wrote with his dad. I haven't read this thing for probably 15 years, maybe. I don't even know. I read it when it came out. So whenever it was published is when I read it. He's got another a novel of absurdist fiction, Revenge of the Thwacker. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. I don't have it anymore. I gave it to a buddy of mine a while back. I should have read it again before I gave it to him. But it was like a Jack the Ripper tale where Chris Elliott was kind of like the serial killer writing the book, going back in time. There was time travel and stuff in it. It was utterly absurd and very entertaining. I should probably just go get another copy so I could read. I think it's called Revenge of the Thwacker. If I'm wrong, I'll put it on the screen. But Daddy's Boy is also really good. This is a great collection of absurdist humor. Emo, I don't know. Why haven't you done a book, Emo? Watch this video, Emo. Emo, he doesn't communicate with me. For a while we did. One time I went to see him and I wore an Overkill shirt. You know, the thrash metal band Overkill. And I'm just, these videos are full of tangents. Overkill defines thrash metal. I don't care what you say. Are they the best thrash metal band? No. Coroner is obviously the best thrash metal band, but Overkill is the most thrash metal band. They define thrash metal because you got to have a certain amount of trash. Thrash is not called thrash metal by accident. It rhymes with trash. It's almost the same word as trash, because you got to be a little bit of a trashy sort of a Jersey Shore sort of person, I think, to really appreciate thrash metal. And Overkill, what am I talking about? You're not here for that. You're not even here for this. You're certainly not here for Emo Philips. You're here for Steve Martin. Let me just get to Steve. Okay, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, John, you're talking about Cruel Shoes in this video, but what about Pure Drivel? John, I love Steve Martin's humor. I love his writing. I know that Pure Drivel was a better book than Cruel Shoes. Why are you talking about Cruel Shoes? Yeah, Pure Drivel is better. This is from 1998. He really honed his craft at this, I don't want to say formula because each story is different. There is no formula. The formula is the absence of formula. He honed that absurdism in short fiction and poetry and perfected it with Pure Drivel. I love Pure Drivel. It's better. I agree with you. But I fell in love with Steve Martin from Cruel Shoes. I always liked his records. I've got all the vinyl. I had all the VHS tapes. I loved his routines. I loved his bits on Saturday Night Live. He was like the only character, the only actor from Saturday Night Live that I kind of really liked. Norm Macdonald wasn't so bad, but most of SNL was just absolutely terrible humor, in my opinion. Steve Martin was the exception to that. Anytime he would appear, it made the show greater, made the show passable. And when you make it greater, because the shows were never great to begin with, even the original cast was not great. But Steve Martin made it, I could digest one of those skits if Steve was in it. What am I saying? Yeah, Pure Drivel was great, but Cruel Shoes is where everything came together. I was already familiar with all of his other stuff and before I came across Cruel Shoes. And when I came across it, I'm like, oh, okay, this all kind of just, this puts a bow around everything for me. That's why I'm making this video about Cruel Shoes. All right, Cruel Shoes. I've got two versions of this book. I got the original hardcover. In my opinion, this size of hardcover for a short book like this is ideal. I don't know why we don't see too many books come out in hardcover that are this thin and this many pages. I think the next time I write something, if I write something that's a standalone story, I'm going to put it in a hardcover. I absolutely love this format with a little slipcover on it and everything like that. I think that's ideal. So I got that one. Then I also have the paperback. The paperback has all new photos. If you could, they probably printed a zillion of these books. You'll have no trouble finding these if you're looking for them. So if you're not familiar with these, definitely seek them out. And they shouldn't even be very expensive nowadays because, like I said, there's probably the market had to have been flooded with this stuff in the late 70s through the early 80s as well. But we're going to look at both of them because I want to show you some of the new photos that are in this one. But I'm going to focus on the hardcover just because the feel of this just feels good to open. I really, really like it. All right, so let's look at this paperback version first. This is a reprint from 1980. And it's the same book as the hardcover, difference being that there are some new photos in this one. And it's not a lot to show you really. So we're just going to I'm going to give you an idea what it is. So it's essentially photos of Steve writing Cruel Shoes. So the first photo in the book is him at the typewriter with an empty trash can, sitting there pondering his stories and what he wants to write about, etc. And basically, I think in the first 5 seconds, well, you don't see this, jeepers, this is kind of what this book has to deal with. The review of Winslow Homer's show at LA County Art Museum. And that's what it says. That's Steve wrote that in here. That's literally one of the stories. That's what you have in store. But at any rate, these pictures. So like it's him drinking stuff, trying to come up with ideas. And as it goes on and on, he continues to work through that. He's getting some ideas there. It looks like, I don't know if that's chloroform or what's going on there with that tissue. But anyways, he keeps going, and then by the end of the book, he's really getting it done. He looks worn out. He's knocked the picture off the wall. He's got a whole bunch of drafts that have gone into the trash can. But in the end, he actually finally finishes the book, and the whole room is a mess. That's the gist of these all-new photos. All right, so let's put that aside for now. Let's look at the hardcover. Again, I really just love the format of this. This is, I don't like to read stuff that's much thicker than this, really. How many pages is this thing? Let's just see what we got here. It's 128 pages, but these pages go extremely quick. I mean, look at the acknowledgments. You know what I'm saying? So just to kind of give you a brief introduction to this, there's photos in this too. It's all photos of his stand-up. And like I said, this was first published in 1977. And look at your table of contents. You can see just by the number of stories in here, look how many stories there are. They're all like 1 page long. And they're like just put in the center of the page. There's not much to each one. So I'm just going to start. I'm going to read. I picked out 5. All right. I got these little flippies in here because I picked out 5 stories out of whatever 30 are in here. And I'm going to read you I'm going to read you those 5 because they're all so short, not even excerpts, the whole thing. But just to give you, to set the tone of what this book is like, here's how it opens. I have spoken of indigestion and garlic. I have spoken of small round beads. I tell of years untold and somewhat starry cities of light. I am telling of crowned sparrows and ceiling lights and magnets and flakes and reckless winters eating cornflowers. I am a fish of the sky, a cloud of the sea. Blue is to fish as sky is to me. That's how the book opens. I love that. I think that is just absolutely wonderful. You may disagree. I don't know. All right. Let's get, like I said, I got 5 stories in here. Pick them out. They're all really short. Okay, there's this first one. This story is called The Bored Leading the Bored, and it's a reprint from Boredom Magazine. Hopefully your subscription to Boredom Magazine is not expired. Well, I never, said Mrs. Watkins. The meeting of the College Council on Metaphysics then applauded her and stood up cheering. Of course, some of the old-school existentialists humbugged it, but nevertheless, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Then Mrs. Jenkins shouted over the crowd, "That woman never ceases to amaze me." The logicians and semanticists gloated and looked anxiously over their metaphysicians to see their reaction to the carefully planted "never ceases" insertion. Mrs. Jenkins obviously had been working for the logicians to arouse insurrection among the 3 or 4 Zeno partisans. But suddenly, Dr. Walker, who had never been a recluse professor for almost 20 years, stood up. With the crowd instantly silenced by his commanding and unexpected rising, he uttered something so incredibly unutterable, so impossible, so unsolvable that the mass of philosophy started heaving right and left and dying on the spot, blood bursting from their ears in an astounding death agony. A little bit of a grim ending to that one. He's poking fun at philosophy, and I think that's very appropriate. All right, let's skip a little bit forward here now. The day the dopes came over. The day the dopes came over. Here we go. I was sitting at home, peeking through the blinds at my neighbor's wife, minding my own business, when the doorbell rang. "Who's there?" I shouted. "We don't know," came the reply. I immediately knew that the dopes had come over. I opened the door and invited them in. I was happy to have company, even if they were a bunch of dopes. "Well, what brings you over this way?" I queried. Yup, they said. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked. "Gall," said one dope. "How long have we been here?" "About 2 minutes." "Gall, we should have left hours ago." And they packed up some of my things and lumbered out. "Goodbye, dopes," I shouted. They turned to me and shouted back, "Goodbye, you big fucking idiot." That's the day the dopes came over. That's a magical story. All right, moving forward. This one's starting to fall apart too. I gotta be, look, I'm losing pages in this. Oh boy. Getting old sucks, guys, as you probably know. Okay. The gift of the Magi Indian giver. Carolyn wanted so much to give Roger something nice. Oh, I remember what this one's about. Okay. Carolyn wanted so much to give Roger something nice for Christmas, but they didn't have much money, and they had to spend every last cent on candy for the baby. She walked down the icy streets and peered into the shop windows. Roger is so proud of his shin bones. If only I could find some way to get money to buy shin bone polish. Just then, a sign caught her eye. Cuticles bought and sold. Many people had told Carolyn of her beautiful cuticles, and Roger was especially proud of them. But she thought, this is the way I could buy Roger the shin bone polish, and she rushed into the store. Later at home, she waited anxiously as Roger came up the steps of their flat. He opened the door and wobbled over to the fireplace, suspiciously holding one arm behind his back. "Merry Christmas," they both said almost simultaneously. Roger spoke. "Hey, Nutsy, I got you something for Christmas." "Me too," said Carolyn, and they exchanged packages. Carolyn hurriedly opened her package, staring in disbelief. Cuticle frames? But Roger, I sold my cuticles so I could afford to buy you some shinbone polish. Shinbone polish, said Roger. I sold my shin bones to buy you the cuticle frames. Roger wobbled over to her. Well, I'll be hogtied, said Carolyn. You will? Oh boy, said Roger. And it turned out to be a great Christmas after all. Boy, I don't know if you strangers have any idea why that's funny. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't know. I got one more to read to you here. Oh, dogs. Dogs in my nose. Okay, here we go. Dogs in my nose. When I woke up that morning, it didn't take me long to realize there were dogs in my nose. I could hear their muffled barks. I could feel their playful vibrations. It's not dangerous to have dogs in your nose. In fact, it's quite all right to leave them in there for a good hour or so. But in this case, because they had gotten in there without my permission, I decided to expel them immediately, coaxing them out with a piece of hamburger. The dogs popped out and landed on the floor. They shook their little floppy ears and bounded off, and I was amused at the prospect of some other weary traveler awakening to find he had dogs in his nose. Steve Martin loves dogs, and there's several stories in this, in Cruel Shoes, and if I remember correctly, also in Pure Drivel that deal with dogs. I just love his absurd stories about dogs and the way he brings dogs into weird things happening in his life and whatnot. I don't know. This book is just great. Cruel Shoes. All right. I don't know if you guys get a kick out of this sort of thing or not. You probably don't. Maybe you do. Maybe someone will stumble across this video that was looking for something about Cruel Shoes. It says the title of the book, Cruel Shoes. There's a story in there called Cruel Shoes, and it's a great story, and I like it a lot. But the reason I didn't read it to you is because he had performed it in one of his stand-up routines or something like that. I forget. I had it on a VHS tape of him performing, reading the story. He was reading the story Cruel Shoes to an audience. And I think in his that DVD collection, the like the best television stuff of Steve Martin, I forget what it was called, the DVD. I ripped it all before I sold my DVD collection. I have them all on a drive. That that DVD collection has the skit where he was reading Cruel Shoes. Anyways, I don't know. It's fun. It's a fun book. If you like that kind of humor, if you value absurdism, I'm a pretty darn rational guy. Like in actual life, I try to be pretty logical in my behavior and decisions and stuff like that. So maybe that's why I'm a little bit too far in that direction to my own detriment sometimes. I can kind of rejoice. Jeez. I could kind of rejoice in the absurdity of stuff like Cruel Shoes, and just that blatant sort of absurdism to me is like gold. I probably said in some video at some point before, like Quentin Dupieux is my favorite director. I adore Quentin Dupieux, and he is on the forefront of this type of entertainment, in my opinion. All of his films are highly, highly absurd. One after the other, they just get weirder and weirder. If you want to, I don't know, you won't, but if you find yourself with absolutely nothing else to do, seek out Quentin Dupieux's film called Dolly, not Dolly. It's like Daahli. It's about Salvador Dali, and it is one of his most absurd films to date. It's amazing. Dolly. You got to say it like that because it's like when Salvador Dali would speak to people, he would be like, I am Salvador Dali. Apparently. I don't know. But that's how he does it in the film. Check it out. Quentin Dupieux, Steve Martin, Chris Elliott, Emo Philips, John Zaremba,